So last week on the Brewer Report, we talked about protein as it applies to folks who are over 50. Today, we are going to talk about the amount of protein you need when you are under 50, particularly the ages of 25 to about 49. In your 20s and your 30s and 40s, you just may need a different kind of lifestyle so that you do age with some strength, so you're not frail as you age. So stay tuned. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another Brewer Report. I'm your host, Stacey Brewer. I'm with my father, David Brewer. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We are very close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. So keep sharing and continue to just join in with our community. We love to chat with you, and we are here to help. And as always, anything we discuss on this podcast is really strictly for educational purposes only. When it comes to your diet, you always have to consult with your own doctors because every body is different. So we obviously can't speak for your own personal health, but we're giving you general information based off of the research we've done. Now, today, as I said at the top, we're getting into protein again, but we're focusing more on those who are under 50. Last week, we were speaking on folks who are over 50 and the amount of protein you need. But today, we're talking about folks who are under 50. And there are some similarities in terms of whether you're sedentary, whether you're active, whether you're very active. Obviously, the more active you are, like we talked last week, you may need more protein. However, we're going to get more into the nuances in terms of the kinds of protein you need when you are under 50. So let's get into it. I'm about to share my screen. All right, so we're getting into the great protein debate, requirements for adults under 50. So, Daddy, let's get into it. We have shattering the universal protein myth. The amount of protein, 25-year-old athlete, 45-year-old office worker, 80-year-old weightlifter. Daddy, I guess you're the weightlifter.
Yep,
Age and
I am.
activity dictate completely different biological rules.
Right. And we're going to get into exactly what those amounts of protein are during those phases of your life, as well as based on your activity during those phases of your life. And so it's extremely to understand, and you're going to be somewhat surprised by the fact that the amount of protein you need early in life is going to be different than the amount of protein you need later in life. In other words, over 50 as opposed to under 50.
Right. So under 50, I mean, the mission is to build your health account. You know, if you
Yes,
think of it like a bank account, you want as much money in it as possible when you're under 50 so that you can kind of, well, I don't want to say retire when you're over 50, but just be more comfortable.
absolutely. And so you're building that muscle mass. You see all these young folks out there that running and lifting weights and things like that, or they're more active, as we say. But their metabolism is also running faster. But the main thing when you're younger, one of the main things you got to be very careful of, and that is to prevent obesity, because obesity is really going to affect your lifestyle later on in life, and as well as your overall health. Now, when you get over 50, you're concerned about anabolic resistance. In other words, you're concerned about sarcopenia. In other words, you're concerned about your body not being able to replace your muscles. In other words, you start to lose muscle mass. And that's what anabolic resistance is. You got to fight that. So you have to preserve what you have, and you have to prevent losing muscles, which you've seen people. The older they get, the more frail they get. In other words, their muscle mass is lower. Their bone structure is worse, and so that's the mission over 50 as opposed to under 50.
Right. So the biological age switch, the rules change completely at age 65, as my dad just mentioned. You have your midlife. The hazards are if you're just consuming too much animal protein, it results in a higher mortality risk. And the solution is to shift more towards a plant-based protein. That is what we discussed last week for the midlife 50 to 65, and then older age, similar. You're just trying to protect your body with quality protein.
Right. You're trying to basically stop from losing muscle mass through sarcopenia. But there's a nuance to this in that midlife area that you got to be extremely careful of, and that's that insulin growth factor number one. And we're going to get deeper into that because if that gets out of control, that starts to affect your life expectancy, and that's why you start to see people in that age group start to have problems. Uh, but that's really driven more by an animal protein diet than it is by a plant protein diet. Even though you may need more protein as you cross that 50 threshold, you want to make sure that you shift more towards plant-based protein as opposed to animal protein and not drive that insulin growth factor dash one up because that starts to create cardiovascular problems, cancer, etc.
Right. So let's get more into that. First, let's deal with the definition. Insulin like growth factor 1.
Right. What it does is it's a hormone that your liver produces. And it's reacting to what is it's a signal. It's reacting to the growth signals from your body. In other words, it's reacting to the cells in your body and proliferating and growing. But what happens is if those cells don't don't really, cells have a life cycle. This is the best way to put that. They have a life cycle, and cells they live, they die, etc. But if some cells don't really leave your body, and all of a sudden they get hit with IGF-1, that starts to cause all kinds of problems in terms of cancer and other problems. And so in other words, your body hasn't cleaned them out. And so all of a sudden they get hit by IGF-1, and all of a sudden now you're starting to get all these disease-causing problems like cardiovascular disease, cancer, etc. And so that's why that's extremely important. And plant-based protein keeps that IGF-1 in check. In other words, it keeps you from having those chronic diseases that we're talking about. So plant protein is the way to go, and they basically don't trigger an aggressive spike of IGF-1 as say animal protein does.
Right. And as you can see in this slide, the plant protein advantage. 1.1 grams or kilograms of plant-based protein results in a neutral to minimal IGF-1 effect. So, according to NIH and AARP data, replacing just 3% of calories from animal protein with plant protein is linked to approximately 10% lower all-cause mortality. So, it's not even about replacing a lot in terms of percentages. It's just a small percentage. Of course, your goal should be more percentage than 3%, but that's still quite amazing. Plant proteins contain lower concentrations of methionine and branched chain amino acids, BCAAs, preventing the liver from triggering an aggressive IGF-1 spike.
Absolutely. And methionine is an amino acid that you need lower concentrations of that. And that prevents the liver, like it says, from triggering that IGF-1. Trust me, you don't want that IGF-1 running wild in your system.
Right. So the built-in molecular buffer system. So let's get into even more of the details, steps 1 through 4.
Absolutely. So increased plant protein prompts a modest increase, because, let's face facts. I want more plant protein. I want more protein, especially as I age. But you got to have the right kind of plant protein, and we'll get deeper into some plant proteins that you don't want. But it basically, even though it's creating a little bit more IGF-1 because the body sees that extra protein, plants have this binding protein called uh, insulin growth factor binding protein that actually binds with the IGF-1 and provides an anchor to it so it doesn't go out and create these aging and cancer promoting effects. In other words, they are blocking that effect. The bottom line of all of this, don't worry about all the science. The bottom line is plant protein, plant foods block a lot of maladies and problems in your body. In other words, they basically protect your body from itself in this particular case. And so it actually is a protective mechanism in your body. Eat plants, period. I know this can get a little confusing, but IGF-1 causes aging and cancer promotion. Hey, that stuff gets neutralized by basically eating more plants.
Right. Now, as my dad was hinting at, there is an exception to the plant rule, however. We already know that whole foods, lentils, beans, nuts, seeds, intact grains are your safest bet, are the king and queen of your dinner plate or lunch plate or breakfast plate. But there are those of us, including myself, when I'm drinking a smoothie and I'm like, ooh, I need me some protein. I'll get me in fact, I bought it, a pea protein powder. But according to this, that may not be the best thing to do.
Right, because it can mimic animal amino acid profiles and can bypass that natural plant buffering system that we just talked about. So protein isolates are not necessarily a good choice when it comes especially as you age, for as a substitute. Whole foods, period. Okay. Beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, as well as other plant-based foods, whole foods. We have, as a nation, we tend to want to isolate everything into pills and powders and all that kind of stuff. In essence, the real answer is just whole food. Period. I mean, my smoothies are loaded, and your mother's kale salad loaded. All have beans and lentils and black rice and purple rice, edamame, etc. I put all that stuff in a smoothie. Okay, I put all that into, especially my post-workout smoothie. You just looked at my post workout smoothie right there. Okay.
And I'm
A lot of
laughing
that's
because he really does load up his smoothies to the point where it's like, wow, this is a lot. But I mean, I guess you have to get all your nutrients the best way you can.
right. And smoothies are an excellent way to do that.
Now, let's break down the foundation per decade. So, like we said, we're dealing with under 50 today for the most part. So, in your 20s, you're building your peak mass, maximize muscle and bone density while the body is hyper efficient. So, yeah, get those weights in, eat well, live well. You're young and thriving, right? And then for your protein, however, the pitfalls are, especially when you're young. I remember in my 20s, what are we doing? We're eating chips and maybe even some protein bars, but we're also eating that fast food while we're ignoring the healthy eating, the fiber and the beans.
Right. This is the fast food era when you're in your teens and 20s and maybe even early 30s. You're eating all that fast food. And you think you're getting protein, but you're not. Okay. But you don't need as much protein. Don't get me wrong. But you do need high quality protein. And you're not going to get it from these bars and chips and fast food diets. You're just not going to get there while ignoring the fiber and the beans. Fiber is so protective. I can't, oh, Lord, if we can't get anything into your head, it's fiber, fiber, fiber. Your high fiber foods, which are your beans and your greens, your mushrooms, berries, and seeds. I mean, you've got to go that route.
And now we go to the 30s. Protecting your metabolism is really the key here once you hit your 30s. And I think a lot of us kind of know that. We know that as we age, our metabolism slows down and it definitely kind of starts in your 30s. So the goal is to fight the activity decline when you're in your 30s, because what's happening? You're starting your careers, and a lot of people's careers are sedentary. You're in your office and you're sitting all the time. So you need to fight that. You need to remain active and walk. In fact, that kind of contributed to when I ended up in the hospital. I had a very sedentary job and still do. And you're also into caregiving. Now, the tactic is to, again, like I said, establish, some type of daily activity, but also in terms of your eating, a daily smoothie, as my dad mentioned. Load up your smoothies with whole foods. Make it a habit to maintain your metabolic rate and energy.
Absolutely. When you look at my pre-workout and my post-workout, smoothies. I've got pomegranate seeds, beet juice, beets, arugula, etc. in that pre-workout. And boy, that just gives you so much energy. But if you're in that office, you got to get up and walk around. Okay. And you're gonna, hey, do a pre-workout smoothie. If you can get away for a quick workout at a Planet Fitness or some kind of exercise place, you go and bingo, you go over there, you work out. When you come back, you drink a post-workout smoothie with a lot of lean bean with a lot of beans and lentils, uh, black rice, tofu, etc. Lots of plant-based protein. And you can throw some berries in there, blueberries, strawberries, and some soy milk. Soy milk is extremely good. Take that. What I do, I freeze it. I freeze it. And by the time you get to work and you finish your workout, it has thawed out. And then you can drink it because you're going to need that protein boost after a workout.
Right. And now we get into the 40s, the bridge decade. Your 40s dictate the architectural foundation of your later years. In fact, I even saw like a reel on that where they were telling folks to kind of test out their mobility, et cetera, because they were saying that that could be a indication of how you're going to age into your 60s and 70s. So, you want to build your muscle mass and fitness here. Those are the major predictors of your long-term health, the bridge from your 40s all the way to your 70s and beyond.
Absolutely. I mean, preserving your muscle mass is extremely important, especially early in your life, but that's all you do. You mainly preserve it. Then you're getting into more of the building of muscle mass the later you get in life. Okay. Um, and you got to control that body fat. I mean, your metabolism slows down. Let's cut to the chase. Your metabolism slows down, so therefore you're not burning as much in terms of body fat, etc. So you got to do that. Dramatically increase your fiber, and that basically will help you with your cardiovascular health. But muscle mass, more protein. The older you get, the more protein you need. Okay, that's the key. You need less early, more later.
Yes. Now, on our last podcast, we talked about daily targets, and keep in mind, these are averages. Again, to figure out your daily protein target for this is for ages 20 to 49. Last week we talked about over 50. But to get your daily protein targets, you're supposed to take your body weight. So let's say you're 150 pounds. I'll put that in the box right here. And you divide it by 2.2, which is a common step when converting grams of protein per pound of body weight, like I said, 150 pounds, into grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So 2.2, that puts you at 68. However, all of this depends on what kind of lifestyle you're living. So if you're sedentary, you in general need to take this number of 68, let's say you're 150 pounds, so we established it's about 68, and you times that, your multiplier. The multiplier we established last week was about 0.8 to 1, but we'll just say zero point 0.8. So that means you need about 54.4 grams when you're sedentary at 150 pounds. And obviously, if you are weighing a little bit more, especially if you're a man, that's, it could be 60 to 80 grams as you see in this chart. And when it comes to active, you need more protein, right, Daddy? Like, in other words, the more active you are, the
Absolutely.
more protein you need.
Right, because your body's burning up muscle. I mean, stressing your muscles. You're going to need more protein to repair. So obviously, that's why you're going to need more. So I think the factor we use there is about 1.1, 1.2,
As a
if you're active
multiplier.
as a multiplier. And so you're going to need more. And then, of course, if you're very active, if you're out there pumping iron like me, you're going to need even more. So you can see
So
right
if we
there.
did the active 1.2 multiplier with the 68 that we just did, that would mean about 81 for active.
Right.
And for very active, we'll just say about 1.5 as a multiplier. That means about 102.
Yeah, 102 grams of protein. Right.
So that's how that works in general. Again, talk to your doctors, but this is again just an average. The point of this slide though is to show you that again, the more active you are, the more protein you will need. So, how do we fuel this sedentary and active lifestyles? Like in terms of the food, I mean, obviously, we've been already saying it. We want quality plant-based proteins. However, we know that some of you will eat meat, particularly chicken, particularly fish. If you are going to eat a chicken breast, I recommend you try to get an organic chicken, air-chilled chicken, the cleanest chicken you can get, if that's possible. And in other words, eat lean animal proteins. Of course, look, we've been very open on this show. Occasionally, we will have fried chicken. Well, I will. My dad doesn't eat chicken at all, but he'll have fried fish. So I'm not saying you have, don't let perfection get in the way here. But we're saying the majority of your lifestyle should be lean proteins. If you are going to do animal protein and organic, and if you're eating fish, try to get wild caught, as you can see with the sedentary life, but mostly plant-based.
Like you said, you try to go as lean as possible because you don't want that saturated fat. I'm a Southern Florida boy. I'm gonna have fried fish twice a month. That's it. The rest of it, I have fish once a week, and out of those once a week, I'll eat fried fish twice a month, and then I'll eat salmon the other two Fridays. Friday's my day, and so, but you won't lean. That's it. Saturated fat is not good. Period. But the good news about eating those lentils and quinoa, uh, if you notice that combination down there, turkey breast with quinoa, guess what? That quinoa's got a lot, and broccoli has a lot of fiber in it. Okay. Same thing with the salmon, with the lentils down there. Because that fiber, that's why fiber is so important. Fiber will absorb at least 20 to 30% of any saturated fat foods as long as you're eating it first. Eat that quinoa first, and then eat the turkey breast.
Right. And it just hit me when my dad is saying how, yes, maybe twice a month he'll have fried fish. But think about that. Twice a month. There are people who eat fried fish sometimes every day or 5 times a week. So times that by four, there's 4 weeks in the month or whatever. Like, in other words, imagine someone who eats, we'll just say it, like, let's say they eat something, a fried animal protein every day. That's 365 days out of the year. If you're just doing it once a week, then we're talking just 52 days out of the year. My dad is even half of that. So that's really not a lot. So that's my point about, this isn't about perfection, but look how significantly different it is when you can just try to limit your fried animal-based protein type eating and even fried plant-based protein eating to just, maybe once to twice a month, right?
Right. I,
Okay.
I eat fish 52, but of that 52, 25 to 20, about 26 is salmon and 26 is fried fish.
Right. So I mean, that's significantly different from someone who may be eating, even if it's not fried, maybe barbecued, maybe just dipped in a lot of sauce and butter. We're talking, I think people have already done like studies on this. Like there are people who literally eat, obviously, ultra processed foods or fried foods darn near every day.
Yep, and that's a recipe for cardiovascular disease as well as cancer.
Right. So again, we're kind of proving it over and over again. But this is obviously just to end this point. You have the very active. We're talking about male here, but this applies to women as well. Very active male or female. Again, have a healthy plant-based breakfast. But Daddy, talk about that post-workout meal. That's
Yeah,
important.
really, like I said, I drink a pre-workout as well as a post-workout. But that post-workout smoothie or meal is extremely important. It needs to be preferably in plant-based protein, so that your body can repair those muscles that have been extreme stressed during your weightlifting or any kind of stressful workout that you may have done. Stressful being, in other words, you want to stress your muscles. You really want to put them, you want to work your muscles. That's why we call it post-workout. You really want to work your muscles so that they become stronger. But as they're becoming stronger, they're going to need protein to rebuild and repair. That's why you see bodybuilders build up so much muscle because they're eating all that protein. The muscles tear, but they repair, and when they repair, they get bigger, etc. So that's what you need. That's the kicker here. If you're going to do heavy lifting or heavy activity, you have to have that extra meal in there called a post-workout meal or smoothie.
And we've already proved our point about your other meals. Again, try to make it as best you can plant forward. Now, but the golden rule of nutrition is don't chase protein, chase nutritious protein. Have your fiber, your quality vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, healthy fats like an avocado or walnuts. Meat is not evil, as we have said, but beans, lentils, vegetables, berries, nuts, and seeds, that G bombs, will also include mushrooms, that brings the essential nutrients that meat simply doesn't provide. That is how you
Absolutely.
build muscle and health at the same time.
Absolutely. Now, beef has, I mean, meat has some vitamins, and a few minerals, but nothing compared to plants. Plants have the biggie for plants is that big A over there called antioxidants. Okay. That's why people who eat a lot of plants have less cancer rates and less cardiovascular disease. And the less cardiovascular disease is something that meat does not have, and that's fiber. Okay, that's that saturated fat that is soaking up and making sure that your heart is your heart and your cardiovascular system is clear, not high in cholesterol, etc. Because meat has a lot of cholesterol in it. Okay. And so that's what this does. That's why plants are so protective. Okay. Antioxidants are extremely important when it comes to fighting cancer, okay, or preventing cancer. So that's extremely important. And it has healthy fats, omega-3, which is good for your cardiovascular system. Okay. So that's why plant-based diets are so protective and will extend, not only extend your life, because you don't want to just live longer, exist longer, you want to live longer. We tell the story about my aunts. I had two aunts. One existed to 91, but she was bedridden for 7 years. But one lived to 93. She was active and she ate well. She ate a lot of whole foods. And my mother, of course, we'll talk about that in a later book that we're getting ready to put out, and how she lived to over 100. Lived to over 100, period.
Yes, so that is the ultimate formula for healthy aging. Your protein, quality protein, preferably plant-based protein. That's why you see this plant right here in the circle. Your fiber. It's like a formula. Protein plus fiber plus resistance training equals healthy aging.
Period. Now, for you ladies out there, you say, well, I'm not going to go over there and be lifting a whole lot of weights. Let me tell you something. When I go to Planet Fitness, guess who I see in there? I see a lot of ladies in Planet Fitness. Okay. They're in there. They are trying to lift the gym, but they are doing some kind of resistance. They'll get on the upper body machines and they'll do a few crunches. They'll do some small barbells, etc. And a lot of them are women of age. Okay. And so because the message is finally getting out there. You really need to do some kind of resistance training in order to avoid sarcopenia and frailty, and in other words, losing your muscles and becoming frail. And it's also good for your bones, by the way. When you do resistance training, it's also good for your bones. And so it's extremely important. But as you see on the left-hand side of this slide, you need to have more plant-based protein and fiber. Fiber. I can't overemphasize fiber. It's just so much better for you. And it's obviously it keeps your body cleaned out, it keeps your arteries cleaned out, etc. So you just live a healthier life. But that is the formula: protein plus fiber plus resistance training. Bingo! Healthy aging. Your age in a much healthier way.
Right. So it's not complicated, you guys. I mean, that's a very simple formula. And also, as that slide stated, protein alone will not equal healthy aging. You need all of those, you need a combination of all of that. It's a synergy type thing. But that's pretty much it for our show today. I feel like we touched on it, hopefully, made it more clear for those of you who are under 50. And to me, it's just simple, like I said, or like we said in that formula. Just try to choose more quality proteins when it comes to building your muscle and be active and get that fiber in and get that resistance training in. Because, like my dad was saying, some women do fear lifting weights because they say, oh, I don't want to look like a man. First of all, I think that's a myth. But the key is you want to do the resistance training really to preserve your muscle mass. That's really the key, especially as you, like we said in a previous slide, when you're in your 40s and you're on that bridge, that 40s all to 70s, you want your muscles to be preserved.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not about, it's all about lifestyle, life expectancy, and living a higher quality life. Like I said, you don't want to exist into old age. You want to live into older age. Okay. And I know it's kind of hard for a 30-year-old to even start thinking like that, but it's coming. You'd be surprised. Life happens real fast. So you want to have those good habits early on in life so that when you do cross that 40 and 50 threshold, you're not having all kinds of health problems, etc. And that you can still be active. Okay? That's the key. As they say, you want to be around not only for your as your children begin to age, but for your grandchildren and other things, other children, other young people as well. You want to be active so that you are there and available to your children and your grandchildren. Uh, it's nothing like an active grandmother. That's all I got to say.
Definitely. So it's all about having a solid foundation. You want, just like, like any house, you want it to have a solid foundation. So that's the key.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Brew Report. We truly care about your health and well being, and we're honored to be a part of your wellness journey. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share it. Until next time, stay informed, stay healthy, and take good care of yourself.